Well, good afternoon, everyone. The time is 1 p.m. and in officially opening this, our first council meeting of the year, can I welcome all councillors who are present. Wonderful to have the full complement together with staff, members of the public who join us in person and indeed online. A reminder, if we could ensure that our mobile telephones are switched off or to silent for the duration of the meeting, and also a reminder that the meeting is being recorded. Please have a seat. In recognition of our journeying together, it's my real pleasure to invite Tasmanian Aboriginal Elder Auntie Sharon Holbrook to provide us with a welcome to country as we begin our council year. Auntie Sharon, welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. How is everyone? I'll be good. I'm going home for a nanny nap after this. Here we go. Yapalinga Mailathina Pakana. Hello and welcome to Aboriginal land. Welcome to our Aboriginal land, that you know as Tasmania, whose foundations are forever in the land, the sky and the seas of Witrawita. And welcome to the new council and, of course, our new mayor. I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay recognition to the history and culture of this land. I acknowledge and pay my respect to our Aboriginal elders, past, present, and into the future, for they are the keepers of our knowledge, of culture, and heritage. We acknowledge the Aboriginal as custodians of this land. I acknowledge the contemporary Tasmanian Aboriginal community who have survived invasion, dispossession, and despite a tragic history, we continue to maintain our identity and the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practices, our land, our dance, our music, and our arts, which informs our understanding of history, culture, science, environment, and recognises the elders' role in supporting the development of the Tasmanian community as we grow strong as a community and move into the future, knowing the importance of maintaining our cultural heritage for the benefit of our children and future generations that come after that. I hope you all have a very safe, happy and healthy year. I hope I do. Getting old. Where am I at? I've lost my spot now. Okay, thank you. And I'll see you next time.
Auntie Sharon, thank you for your words. We always appreciate the wisdom that you bring with your welcome to country. We thank you not only for providing that to us today, but all that you do to bring us closer together. It's appreciated and acknowledged. And so in the spirit of reconciliation, we, the people of Launceston, recognise that Launceston is situated on country of which the Tasmanian Aboriginal people have been owners for many thousands of years, and on which they performed age-old ceremonies of celebration, initiation and renewal. We acknowledge the Aboriginal community of today, the living culture, the unique role of the life of this region, and we offer our deep appreciation of the ongoing contribution to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2, Mayor's acknowledgements. I'd just like to take this opportunity to reiterate our thanks to all of those council staff members who worked so hard over the break. While many were on holidays or had time off, there were many staff members, CEO, that continued to keep the great work of our council continuing. And so we appreciate those council members that worked throughout that period of time. Item 3, declarations of interest. In accordance with Regulation 8 of the Local Government Meeting Procedure Regulations of 2015, elected members are required to indicate whether they may have any pecuniary or conflict of interest in respect to any matter appearing on today's agenda. Are there any declarations? Councillor Dawkins. 14.2.3, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
14.2 Community of Place Network in relation to the consideration of these events.
Thanks, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Harris.
14.2, the new major signature events.
Thank you. Thank you. No other declarations at this time. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes. That the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council meeting held on the 15th of December be confirmed as a true and correct record. Someone to move, please, that recommendation. Councillor Harris, thank you. A seconder. Thanks, Councillor Britton. There being no alterations to those minutes, we'll put the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That's all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Item 5, council workshops. The workshop report of the meeting of the 19th of January. That we note those topics covered and that we note the attendance listed in point 2. Someone to move the recommendation. Councillor Mackenzie, thank you so much. A seconder. Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, Mayor, and it sort of relates to our pre-council workshop as well, just to acknowledge the work that's done in regards to talking to us about the estuary that we work on. We live on the Tamar estuary and all of the issues associated with it, and I think the timeline and the matters raised by the officers and the education they've given us as councillors is first class, and I look forward to that becoming more of a public fora at some stage where the community can actually get a better understanding of how we're managing our river.
Agreed. Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Dawkins. Any councillor wish to speak to the item? Councillor Walker.
Yes, just to speak, I have been asked by a number of people if council have had any discussions following the removal of the $10 million Building Better Regions Fund Round 4 grant and the implications for council interests in the Patterson Street site and to a lesser extent Birchall's. And I presume that in moving this particular item that the City Heart project and councillors receiving an update on progress for the City Heart project is reference indeed to ongoing discussions regarding that.
So, Councillor Walker, it's the same heading and same item that was listed in our agenda papers. You're correct.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Any other contributions for 5.1? Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to close? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present, and the motion is carried. Item 6, there are no councillors' leave of absence applications on page 12. We move to item 7, community reports. It's wonderful to start the year with a community report from the National Book Council of Tasmania, and we welcome Jan, the President, and Jackie, the Secretary, to share with us about the National Book Council of Tasmania, Launceston. Please make your way to any of the microphones. Jan, great to have you with us. There's one just behind you. Councillor Britton, you might help distribute those papers. Thank you. Wonderful. A big welcome, Jan.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. The National Book Council Tasmania is a very small group, but we do contribute to the cultural life of Launceston, and we hope to the business, the booksellers' business of Launceston as well. So the National Book Council of Tasmania, it's the National Book Council Tasmania, not of Tasmania, exists to bring information about the world of books to a Launceston audience, and the emphasis is on Tasmanian writing, but not exclusively. So it's a small group that's a remnant of a time when there were book councils throughout the nation, hence the National Book Council. Those have largely died away, but not in Launceston. we still continue. It's a volunteer-run, unincorporated society and has a committee of 6 who arrange speakers and publicise events. And we run speakers and events from February to November each year. We've got a membership currently of 46 people, so we are small, although meetings are publicised to the general public and people are welcome to join and attend a meeting. Membership is $15 a year, so it's not huge. Although members receive a $5 book token from Petrarch's bookstore, so the membership is effectively $10 a year. Non-members are welcome for a $5 session, at $5 a session. So we do try to make it as accessible as possible to everybody in the community. We work closely with Petrarch's bookstore. They often suggest authors, or they often bring books to sell to support the authors as they speak. We've collaborated with the Tamar Valley Writers Festival. Last February, we collaborated with them to launch Sally Wise's new book, A Year on the Farm, with Sally Wise and Chris Wisby, and a beautiful afternoon tea that was catered by Sally. We normally meet every third Wednesday of the month at the Launceston Library's meeting room, but we do have an evening meeting if we think that we're going to have a very popular speaker who will attract a wider audience. So last year, for example, we hosted Joy McCann, who wrote Wild Sea, A History of the Southern Ocean. And I really do urge you to have a look for that book. It's a wonderful book about the Southern Ocean, but it's dealt thematically. So there's sections about history, sections about the tides, sections about the flora and fauna. It's a magnificent book. And she spoke about her book and then was in conversation with Peter Wish-Wilson, and that was a very interesting evening. We've collaborated with Petrarch's to launch Katie McMahon's book, The Accident. Katie is an emerging writer. She's written one book called The Mistake, and The Accident is her second novel. And it's a psychological character-driven thriller, really. There's an accident and a whole lot of characters, and you don't know what part those characters have played until you get to the very end of the book. It's well worth a read. We've had a very interesting speaker called Karen Mace, who spoke on grief and resilience. Karen has written Looking Back, Moving Forward, and another book called A Grief Revealed. And she is somebody who knows of what she speaks. She lost 3 children. So she is well aware of the grief and the influence it has on people's lives. And she's in the process of writing a new novel, her first novel, called The Zumba Class. Another Tasmanian writer who spoke to us was Leonie Crowden, who has self-published a number of books about Woolmers, and her particular draw card was the paranormal at Woolmers, Tales from the Grave and Beyond, and that went down very well. We've also had Jeanette M. Robertson, who was the writer in residence at the Glover Cottage, and she wrote a book called Bone and Beauty, The Ribbon Boys' Rebellion. Now, it's not strictly Tasmanian, and we aren't exclusive to Tasmania. This is a story of the Bathurst Rebellion in 1830, but because Jeanette was Launceston-based and because a number of our members are very interested in convict history, we felt this was a really good speaker to have. We interpret the world of books quite widely. Our very successful speaker to launch last year was Vicky Madden, who's a script writer, and she did the script writing for the Kettering incident and for the bill. So she wrote about the process of writing a script as opposed to writing a book. again, very interesting for us. We've had booksellers. We had Michael Roach from the bookseller in Campbelltown, and he specialises in Tasmanian books. So, of course, you know, he was great to have. And we've also had Toby Woolscobb of Quixotic Books. Now, I don't know if you know Quixotic Books, but it's a bookstore like no other down in the Quadrant Mall, just at the beginning of the Quadrant Mall in Brisbane Street, upstairs. And it's a very quirky bookstore with titles you won't find anywhere else. And he also operates a bookfinding service of rare and unusual books. So in a small way, we do try and publicise and support the work of the bookstores in Launceston and in the region. One of our more interesting sessions was a session on book clubs, how people get together and read and talk about books. And a book club that I was not aware of was one called the Tough Guys Book Club. And it's a purely men only. It's a national organisation, and they do have a chapter here in Launceston. We had Carol Fuller, who's a judge for the National Children's Book Award, and she spoke on the process of judging and what it entailed. Now, in terms of money, we have a small bank balance. We've got about $5,000. We use it quite sparingly. If we want to bring an author from Hobart or the mainland, we have to think very carefully about that because obviously there's a cost involved. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you what we do.
Thanks, Jan, and we certainly value what it is that you and your committee do, and we wish you all the best for 2023. Item 8 on the agenda is public question time. 8.1, public questions on notice. I draw your attention to the responses provided to 8.1.1, Patterson Street Car Park, Homelessness and Waste Management Strategy on pages 13 and 14. 8.2, public questions without notice. Elizabeth, I wonder if you could please read the rules.
If you are participating in public question time, please move to the microphone and state your name and address. You may then ask up to 3 questions. Please direct your questions to the Mayor. The Mayor may refuse to accept a question. If this happens, reasons will be provided. If your questions are accepted, they will either be answered at this meeting or taken on notice and answered at a future council meeting. Debate or discussion about questions or answers is not permitted.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and I can see Mr. Baines in hot pursuit of the microphone. Mr. Baines, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to all of you. I'm not sure if it'll continue that way, but still, we'll see what happens.
It's a good way to start. Over to you.
Ron Baines, ratepayer, Kingsmeadow. How does council intend to market the real estate they own, known locally as Birchall's? Will it be by public auction, tender, or a recognised real estate firm?
Thanks, Mr. Baines, for the question pertaining to the Birchall's building. There is a live and current expression of interest process that we will bring to a resolution in the coming weeks, at which point then council will determine the way forward with regard to that once that process has been concluded, and then we'll release publicly its intentions with regard to the site.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any movement providing a right-hand turn arrow from Lindsay Street onto the Charles Street Bridge yet?
Thanks for that question again, and I note your keen interest with regard to that particular intersection. The simple answer at this point is no, but councillors have heard your persistent requests for it and will continue to listen with regard to those that are received from other members of the public and yourself.
Okay. Last one. Has council discussed the possibility of supplying Launceston with more disability parking spaces? Because we have a lot of disabled people in Launceston, very few spaces available to them.
Thanks, Mr Baines. Definitely hear your question there. And again, councillors will have heard that question and perhaps have their own experience with regard to members of the public asking a similar one. When we endorsed the Transport Strategy 2020 to 2024, it was determined at that time that there were a suitable number of access parking spots made available. That being said, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't continue to engage and listen when members of the public, such as yourself, bring forward particular needs or pockets of the city as it continues to develop where there is a glaring omission or lack of access parking spots. So we might register that a little more fully in terms of the number that we currently provide and any work that's ongoing with regard to our city heart intentions, etc., the provision of that necessary service in our future works.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Are there any other questions without notice? There being none, we'll move to item 9, Planning Authority. Under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items included in the agenda Planning Authority, specifically 9.1. I'll ask Elizabeth to read our guidelines with regard to speaking to a planning item.
Speaking to an item of today's agenda, the Mayor will invite you to come forward to the microphone. Please state your name and address. You may speak for up to 2 minutes either for or against the recommendation. You will hear this sound when you have reached your time limit. You may not ask questions or enter into debate with councillors or council officers. Your statement is not to be defamatory, inappropriate or abusive or be intended to embarrass any person. The Mayor may direct you to stop speaking if you do not follow these rules or if points have already been made.
Thank you, Elizabeth. 9.1, 243 to 247 Wellington Street, business and professional services, alterations and additions to an existing building and consolidation of 3 lots into one, page 16 of the paper agenda. Welcoming Dan Ryan, Manager of Community and Place. The first speaker listed is Gary O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Just like to, I guess, start off the conversation and also to highlight the fact that the car parking issue has always been at the forefront of the management team and the owners of the property and the complex and the development. So, in addressing that, I'd like to say that over the time that this complex on this land has actually extended, car parking has been guided and built into the structure. Like when it was initially opened, there was a covered way which turned into car parking. It was then extended by purchasing a property in Cleveland Street, which had land around it so that could be turned into car parking. The development further extended with the dip and strip purchase. Even though there was a complex built over the top of it, car parking was seen as a structural component of needing to extend that, even through to the Union building, which has also got car parking around it. One of the things that we honestly feel that we've tried to do is to make sure that car parking is seen as a priority in the area, given the limited area available, given the other businesses and hospital in the area. More recently, the movement to purchase the Honeywell building with a strict and primary purpose of extending the car parking and moving those people that require parking within the complex area to be moved to that location, so it frees it up for patients who need to be close when they have an appointment.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The second speaker listed is Jerome Wilson.
Thanks, Mayor and councillors. And clearly parking has been brought up by the community. And I remember being here a couple of years ago in a council workshop that was really productive, where we talked about parking together in the precinct and what we can do together. nothing's developed out of that, but we've had a really good working relationship with council, and as you've heard, the Honeywell site we've purchased so we can expand sites further. Certainly we're cognizant of our neighbours and working with the community. I was fortunate enough to be asked to sit on the LGH Master Planning Committee where we looked at the next 50 years. And parking, there was a three-way parking study under the council, Calvary and the LGH. The entrance is moving onto Cleveland Street to get rid of that little U-bend off Charles Street, which isn't very functional outside emergency. And that won't increase the flow much onto Cleveland Street because it's got this existing car parks and some future development planned for that. In our building application, which is coming to you shortly, you'll see some car park signs for the external onto Cleveland Street to let people know if there's some car park spots available, or they should go to the next option to find one of the 160 car parks on site. GHD have had a look at the traffic flow, and that works quite well, especially with a turn right arrow and the traffic light at the bottom allowing breaks in traffic and a smooth entrance and exit to it. And we're certainly continuing to work with people, and as Gary mentioned before, we always have that at front of mind of options to do. So we certainly want to continue the conversation with the council about health precinct parking and other options for patients of the hospital and look for solutions to that. We've done a massing diagram looking at multiple levels we could add to a Honeywell to actually either lease out to the hospital or work with the council to provide extra parking beyond what we need, realising that a number of patients from the hospital use our car park because it's free and there's none there. But we don't like to enforce that too much, and we don't see it as enough of a problem to have to put a boom gate or anything in at this stage, but we can do that in the future if we need to. So thanks so much for the collaborative working relationship, and we'll catch you later.
Thanks, Jerome. The next speaker listed is Sam Tucker.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, and hello, councillors. I note that there's already two, so I'm speaking in favour of this application. We note that there's already two existing permits essentially in place for essentially the same development. With these, they're already in place. There are two different floor configurations, but it's effectively the same doctor to car park ratio that's already in place. With this particular development, construction costs meant that we need to sort a new DA to reduce the floor plan to allow the building to be built and provide the essential service that it will provide to Launceston. So discretion is being sought for car parking, but we make the point that the ratio has been worked through with the traffic engineer, as Jerome pointed out, and from a practical business point of view, it is considered acceptable. The broader car parking issues at the LGH are not relevant to this application. It's understood that council are working with stakeholders to address the car parking issues in the precinct at large. Speaking personally, I've attended meetings with Jerome and his team almost weekly over the past 5 years, and I genuinely can't remember the last time I hadn't been able to find a space. I would like to speak to condition 7 of the permit, which talks to the consolidation of titles. The proposed condition asks that, or requires that, construction works can't commence until the titles are consolidated. With works planned or anticipated to be started as soon as March this year, this will create an issue for the development process. So we would like to offer an alternative that the works may start, but occupation of the building cannot be considered until the consolidation of titles has been achieved. This means that the risk lies with the developer to resolve the titles, to consolidate the titles without passing any unnecessary risks onto the authorities. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sam. Are there any additional speakers to item 9.1? None. Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillors, I draw your attention to the memo of yesterday's date, which says, following review by council officers, it was deemed appropriate to incorporate an additional condition in the recommendation published to the DA in the council agenda. The additional inclusion relates to parking and display signage and is included in the formal recommendation. It reads at point 11, as visible on the screen, available parking signage. Prior to the commencement of the use of the building approved by this permit, Parking sensors must be installed and the number of available car parks displayed at the Cleveland Street car park entrances, excluding the ground floor car park. The memo continues that the remaining conditions in the recommendation have been renumbered to reflect the additional condition and that there are no other alterations to the published agenda item. Seeking someone, please, to move. General Manager Dan.
So there is an additional amendment that's been proposed. As per Mr Tucker's commentary there, the change is specific to point 7, the consolidation of titles. The proposed new wording would be that prior to the commencement of the use, instead of construction works, so that is of the use, all lots being certificates of title volume 227180 folio 1 and volume 228901 folio 1 and volume 70186 folio 2 must be consolidated into a single lot under the Local Government Building and Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1993.
Thanks, General Manager Dan. Deleting the words construction works, replacing it with the word use. Are there clarifying questions with regard to that administrative matter before we seek to find a mover? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. In regards to that proposed amendment, is it correct procedure for that amendment to potentially come from a representation? Would that be a normal process, or surely that amendment would be proposed by a member of the council?
CEO.
So the officers have the prerogative to be able to make an amendment to their recommendation post the agenda, provided they do what we are now, which is explaining it and offer the opportunity for questions and answers.
Any further administrative questions with regard to those two additions, one change and one addition? Okay, seeking to have someone move the item with those two changes. Thank you. Councillor McKenzie has moved. A seconder. Councillor Palmer. Councillor McKenzie, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you. And I thank you for the comments made by the speakers because I think they clarify the situation. I think what we need to be aware of, we've already approved a development on this site for much the same configuration, other than the basement has now been removed from the development application, which was to house greater parking. So what we've ended up with is a lower parking model in regards to that. And if you look at the representations that were received, the two things that were raised were parking and traffic congestion issues on the highway. If I deal with the second one first, because I think the one's straightforward, I think GHD have done a traffic impact assessment in regards to it and believe that the road network has still plenty of capacity in relation to receive the cars moving in and out of there, and therefore see no issues in relation to traffic management. In relation to the parking, if you read through the officers' responses, and I think the comments made by the speakers in regards to, I think that the proponents have worked tirelessly with council and the state government in regards to parking issues. And I know we've spoken about number variants. We've met on site, I think, down there to discuss potential parking options. And I'd still love for council and the state to consider the Taswater site on the other side of the road as a potential place in the pond there when it's not filled up, which is 99% of the time, or 99.99% of the time, with particular warnings. I appreciate there'll be risks associated with it, but I believe they should be talked about because I personally believe they could be mitigated, and also conversations with Metro in relation to their site on the basis that they operate on a big site, and even with a consolidation and actually more efficient use of that site, there may well be car parking alternatives at that point in time. Having said that, that's not what today is about, but I think it's contextually valuable that there are parking things, and I know the proponents have been continuing to work with us and others in relation to trying to develop those, part of which then brought them to purchase the Honeywell site up the road to enable some parking to be provided. Conversation's been in relation to, again, not related, well, is related because potentially there is a greater parking arrangements that can be dealt with. But having said that, the requirement of 284 car spaces, which was put in one of the representations, is the acceptable solution, and therefore we need to go to performance criteria. The officers have worked through that, and that's based on there's 4 people for each 4 spaces for each practitioner. I think the officers have gone through and explained why they don't need 4 spaces for each practitioner. One is the practitioners are not being provided with car parking on site, and neither are the staff. So that takes half of the requirement back out of the whole thing. And whilst it doesn't completely solve the parking issues in relation to each of those, the Honeywell site further up the road has been provided for some of the staff car parking. Yes, there will be need for requirement. I live in the area, so I know the parking issues really well. Councillor Walker does as well. So I appreciate it's putting more pressure, but it's a more broader concept about the LGH parking, not just this particular parking. I believe having a central medical hub, and I guess if you read the literature about GP networks and things like that, and the actual reduction of this, the model that Dr Muir Wilson and his partners have put together in relation to providing more centrally located GP services is something which is probably a model of the future. It's close by to emergency services and all sorts of reasons why it is a good setup. So from my perspective, the officers have gone through the relevant issues in regards to parking. They've identified why this can work, but also understand the need for us to continue to work on this. It's also noted that it is a business as well, and providing parking for its patients is something which is either going to win or lose for the developer in relation to the matter. So therefore, it is in their best interest to ensure that there's appropriate parking there to ensure that their people can get there. I think the other point is to be made as well. I think the number of practitioners of 71, I think the number is, they're not all there at one time. I think we dealt with this issue on another DA a little while ago. So the fact that 71 are there, they're not there all the time. And I think if you look at the way the medical profession is evolving, there's a lot more sessional work rather than full-time work in relation to lots of things that are going. So I think that the assessment that's been made and put forward for us to accept today is something which is really appropriate, and I think it's a good business that really needs our support today.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Seconder, Councillor Palmer.
Not much more to say, but I'd back up Councillor McKenzie. Everything he said, he's pretty much said it all. So I'd agree with what he said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other contributions at this point? Councillor Walker, a question?
At this point, we're talking about the amended motion that we're discussing, and I suppose I just wanted to...
So it's not amended, so this is the motion?
The motion.
Yeah. With those 2 changes?
The changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not amendments.
Not amendments because they were put forward by the officers before the commencement of the debate.
Thank you. If I could just get a qualified opinion from the planning department or a planning officer in regards to the amendment regarding the commencement of construction being, not necessarily tied to the consolidation of titles, please, and potentially, what problems that could, what problems could be foreseen in that scenario.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Through you, General Manager, to Manager of Planning. Question with regard to condition 7, consolidation of titles.
The modification condition doesn't change the outcome or effect of the condition. It just provides slightly more flexibility for the proponent in the sequencing of the work. There's no, it is a little bit tied up with being able to get building permits and the building permit process and the delays that it might through the title consolidate, and things can be twin tracked, and there's no planning reason why we wouldn't provide that opportunity to the proponent. So when that was pointed out to us, we were more than happy to accommodate that request because the outcome doesn't change, it just provides slightly more flexibility to deliver.
Thank you, Manager Richard. Any further questions? Any additional speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I can understand people's enthusiasm for this particular development. I think everybody knows what this medical hub has brought to Launceston in terms of the availability specialists and medical services. And obviously the proponents are keenly aware of the parking issues, and those are the things that have been the primary concern of the community, and I'm sure of council and councillors too. Having said all that, though, we do fall way short of what is normally considered appropriate in these situations, which is up to 4 parking spaces per practitioner, left with a number that's somewhat double as to what is provided, and to layer upon that also, as was pointed out by Councillor Mackenzie, an initial plan that did have additional parking that has now since been removed. It's understandable that causes consternation. Alongside the concept that this is now being talked about as a medical precinct, and yet no medical precinct exists formally in terms of planning. The state government does want to develop a master plan for the hospital area, and indeed there are many medical practitioners that are located in the area, but specifically from a council point of view, we don't have a policy regarding this as a medical precinct. Perhaps we should. Perhaps that would help to alleviate the parking issues if there was a centralised repository of car parking spaces that would service a precinct as such, but we don't have that. So it is beholden upon the council today to weigh those things up. I think at times it seems convenient to be able to talk about a medical precinct, and at other times it seems convenient to be able to talk about a separate project devoid of any concerns that are happening around it regarding hospital parking or, and so they do become matters somewhat of convenience depending on which part of the development you're referring to. Now, having said all that, I will be supporting this motion today, but I do add my voice to those concerns. I don't think it's necessarily purely the responsibility of this development and this developer to solve those problems. We know that there are various parking options in the area, including, as Councillor Mackenzie also refers to, outside my front door in South Launceston. And there's many people in South Launceston who are in a similar situation because there's some free all-day parking in the precinct, if you like. And what I'm told and what other residents are told is that this is just the price you pay for living in this precinct. And for those listening, I am giving inverted commas to the word precinct. It's not a precinct. It's a central business district, it's a commercial district, but we have not, as a council, recognised that it is a precinct and therefore made planning appropriate that would suit the development of a precinct. That's what I would like to see happen. I don't think, as I've said, that that's necessarily something that you can land at the feet of particular developers, but it's certainly something. And I would, for example, mention that certainly the hospital master plan would like to use Cleveland Street and have indicated they would use Cleveland Street as an entrance to the hospital. Of course, that'll put additional pressure on that intersection. I know traffic studies have said that may, conceivably it can handle a lot more traffic. But one example is coming along Wellington Street, heading north, you will turn right into Cleveland Street, and there is a slip lane there indeed to provide that. Indeed, it's a traffic light controlled intersection, but that slip lane has room for perhaps 2 to 3 cars. Now, what already happens is people experience that slip lane can become clogged when you've got more than 2 or 3 cars wanting to turn in that direction. It's just an example. Again, I say, it's not particularly the fault or the result of the developers' proposed actions, but it's something for that whole area, if we are talking about a precinct that doesn't exist, that perhaps we need to address as a precinct and, providing such important services to Launceston that we are underserviced in regards to specialists, in regards to 24-hour medical facilities, and in regards to services that will provide central, accessible medical facilities. And all of those things this developer is providing. So I certainly will be supporting that today, but I put that extremely cautionary tale there because we have, and I will finish on this, thank you, Mayor, but we have been forewarned and we have the opportunity to make the changes necessary, rather than in 10 years' time say, why did we let that happen? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Dr. Raze.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps I might make a comment here, as Councillor Walker had raised a point there. I would like to talk about what our patients are experiencing, because I have worked in the hospital, and finding parking spaces is one of the most stressful things for them to find. This had been for years. And I have to point out as well that the more parking spaces you build, the more people use cars. And that's actually proven in studies. So building more car parks actually is not going to solve the problem. And this is what I don't want, like Launceston to end up. It's all full of parking spaces. It's probably time to answer your question, is how it's important how all the health centers concentrated in that area, how we should have an alternative method of transport rather than just driving cars around there. We are like just to raise the point how having good public transport like buses that connect all suburbs, that they are efficient, regular, like let's say every 15 minutes, that people can rely on.
Councillor Raze, you're getting lots of nods from around the table, but if we could just keep it with regard to this particular planning consideration.
So I am supporting the plan, but all the developers, they are doing their best to address the issue of car parking, but car parking space is not just the only one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor Mackenzie, would you like to close?
I do, and thank you for the comments made. And I think that the upshot of it is we need to keep working on parking. It is something, and I appreciate that, and I think that certainly the proponents in their comments have also appreciated the need to do that. And on Councillor Raze's comments, they are providing parking for their customers or their patients. So that's pretty much what they're doing. They're not doing it for the practitioners and their staff is the issue. So anyway, I think that this is a good outcome in regards, well, the best outcome in this particular instance. I appreciate the economic reasons why this development application is now back in front of us. I think as the proponent said, and I think we've said, and we are working hard with the state government, the hospitals, as in the council, in relation to the car parking in that area, and trying to come up with, and maybe one day we will become a precinct, Councillor Walker, but today is not that day. But I think there's a lot of work done, and I still think there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that we improve the parking arrangements that we do have in regards there, noting that a lot of patients come and they need to be driven because of their medical nature, but particularly to a hospital structure. But anyway, I stand here to endorse and support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Council no longer sits as a planning authority. On page 28 of the agenda, we move to announcements by the Mayor. Just two things I'd like to further expand upon. The first one is what a joy it was to be present together with the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Dr. Raze at our annual community Christmas lunch. A wonderful, wonderful provision of an incredible lunch filled with spirit, filled with a gift for children, filled with happy conversation, and most importantly, affording those people that found themselves lonely by themselves, unable to share Christmas with others, or unable to afford a Christmas lunch, to join with all manner of members of our community, totalling more than 350, to celebrate in a community Christmas lunch. This year, under the leadership of the City Mission, together with the support of a number of other charities working collectively, and of course supported through our community grants program. I also wanted to reiterate, as you can see in the items listed there, the plethora of community, cultural and artistic events that have occurred over the December-January period. Just incredible to celebrate different cultures, to celebrate new music festivals and initiatives here in Civic Square, and to be able to recognise and celebrate the talents of so many within our community. We'll move to item 11, councillors' reports. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. On December the 11th, I attended an online forum put on by Zero Waste Events and Visit Northern Tas about the intractable issue, seemingly intractable issue of PFAS in our compostables. So if we think about the work we've been doing over the last 4 years, we've gone from single-use plastics, which are petroleum-based at all of our events, through to compostables, which are a post-consumer product made of maybe sugarcane or another byproduct from industry, which we believed would be suitable for compost and we could then spread on gardens and do whatever we needed to with. As we move through to reusables, which are the gold standard for events, and in fact for any kind of hospitality organisation that gives people food to take away. But unfortunately, we've got a bit stuck at step 2 because the compostables are now found to have PFAS in them, which is, unfortunately, as you may have heard, a forever chemical, a horrible title for anything. So it can be in all manner, it can be in something like the covering here, in our clothing, but in compostables, it's that thin layer that keeps a coffee from burning you, or a hot and sour soup from burning the person handling it. It seemed to be a perfect solution, but it's not. So whilst we've now suspended compostables being able to go into our FOGO, there is talk in the industry of an April-May deadline for resolution of the problem, which of course doesn't solve the amount of compostables that are now in the market that need to go somewhere. So they'll all go into landfill, which is a really sad outcome. But there was some positivity around the way that Zero Waste Events are working with individuals like Harvest Market or Lydia from Small Grain to come up with some really clever solutions. So one that was put forward was a container, which is a reuse station. So you set up a container, it's got washing facilities in it, which all pass environmental health standards, but you can then hire it to other events so they can use reusables. It keeps the money in the community and it stops this seemingly intractable problem from being a problem. So whilst we're in a kind of a hiatus now, there is a solution, and I'm really hoping next time we speak about it that we'll know what that is.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins.
Just briefly, sorry,
Sure. No,
I know that was a bit longer
fine.
than usual. I'd also like to congratulate the City of Launceston for the inclusion of sanitary products in the women's bathrooms. That's been a long time coming, but for a lot of women, for a long time we talk behind the scenes and say, why isn't this available the same way that toilet paper and hand towel is? Because it should be. So this is one step, we think, in the next iteration of changes here. And I'd like to foreshadow that Councillor McMahon and I are working together on a motion that we'll bring to Council to keep moving into this space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. Going back in history a little bit now, the first Big Bash, Hurricane Scorchers, I attended out at UTAS Stadium. Time has got by. It's now the last game of Big Bash, and in fact, UTAS Stadium again hosts the Hurricanes against Brisbane Heat, and the Brisbane Heat are bowling and Tasmania is batting. On the 17th of this month, I attended a community meeting with the Inspector Philip Norton of Tasmania Police and about 20 local businesses, talking about crime in the Kings Meadows area. So that was a community meeting brought about by the Kings Meadows Hotel based on what has been happening in that area in the last few months that has been very noticeable to the local traders. So that was something we attended there. And just briefly on Monday, I attended the launch of the third round of the Great Regional City Challenge with Owen Tilbury down at the Van Diemen project offices, where people are now able to submit their ideas through to the end of March, when for funding of up to $10,000, which then will be voted on by members of the Northern Tasmania community during April and May. So there are 6 categories this year of which people can put their applications in, including 2 new categories for people under 25. So I just wanted to bring that to those who might be listening and perhaps those councillors in their networks, that have a look at that website, because it could be an opportunity As in fact, if you look at our City of Gastronomy, that's where that started, in fact, in round one of the Greater Regional City Challenge. So that's now open. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to briefly touch on a couple of things that we've been lucky enough to head to this week and this month coming up. We headed out to Lilydale, which is quite often felt as though they have, like to be a little more integrated into the Launceston City Council community and the City of Launceston Council. We were out there to celebrate the pool, the $300,000 renovations that have been going on there. And for a little bit of the time, it was just a couple of us swimming there. Councillor Palmer and his two boys and their friend were there. Mayor was able to join us as well to enjoy, I think, a quarter bit of sun that day as well. But it was great to be able to celebrate that community and to have been invited out there. The sausages were fantastic. They have just asked if they might be able to get a little bit of weeding out sprayed throughout, but that can be brought up another time. And also just to speak on, Mayor, what you touched on with the community Christmas and just being able to say that their ability to adapt from what they would normally have at the Albert Hall and being able to move and to find a new precinct up there with the Door of Hope and not to have been able to use that as an excuse not to put on something for the community, but to have taken it for something for us to have supported and to see that continue as they have with the drive-through service that they had throughout COVID and through this new challenge that they had with the renovation. So it's great to see not only our input back into the community, but how that's received and able to facilitate those in all walks of life and members of our community from different stages. So,
thank you, Deputy. Any further councillor reports? Let's move to questions by councillors. 12.1, councillors' questions on notice. 12.1.1, a response to Councillor Pentridge's question from the last meeting of the year with regard to that confusion around the surplus. 12.1.2, question from the last meeting also from Councillor Walker, further unpacking the commission and the state funds there. And 12.1.3, Councillor Dr. George Raze's questions listed there with regard to better health outcomes. They are the questions on notice. Councillors' questions without notice. Councillor Dr. Raze.
Thank you, Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak about an important topic which concerned everyone, which was about promoting healthy, happy and active community. Despite having the most advanced medical technology and spending more on healthcare, we are facing a health crisis, having one of the highest rates of chronic health problems like heart disease, high blood pressure, heart failure, and diabetes and stroke. Now, as you know, obesity and high blood pressure are the main drivers of chronic health problems, and they are reaching epidemic proportion in Tasmania. Tasmania had the worst rate of overweight and obesity, 71% compared to 67% national average. We have the highest obesity rate, 35%, compared to national average of 31%. In addition, 60% of men and 66% of Tasmanian women have a very large waist circumference, which is an indicator of abdominal obesity, which causing chronic health problems. In addition to that, Tasmanian children have the highest overweight and obesity. About 29% of our children are overweight or obese, compared, let's say, in Victoria, 23%. And add to that, more than a quarter of our Tasmanians have high blood pressure too. So some of the contributing factors for all these is the dramatic change in our lifestyles and dietary habits over the last 20 years. Today, Australians eat diet which is rich in salt, with fewer vegetables and fruits, and drinks more sugar-sweetened and diet drinks, and they are getting less exercises. Only 9% of Australians eat the recommended amount of vegetables, which is about 5 serves a day. And only 45% eat the recommended amount of fruits, which is about like 2 serves a day. And more than nearly 3/4 of Australians, they don't meet physical activity guideline, which is like 150 to 300 hours per week. Unfortunately, our healthcare systems, globally especially, focus mainly on treating patients when they are sick, rather than preventing health problems. So identifying the root causes of this chronic health problem is a difficult challenge and requires the collaboration of many people at all levels, city council, state, federal government, as well as health professional, community groups, and individuals. We should pay an increased attention to help Launceston to live healthy lifestyle and encourage physical activity and making it easier and safer for people to walk and cycle, providing more walkable spaces, better protected bike lanes, and more recreational spaces are important. In addition to that, there is lack of fresh food, and we have limited options of places where we can get fresh food.
Point of order. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Just that we are in questions without notice section.
Thank you. Councillor
If you have
Raze,
some
I
guidance.
feel
Thank you.
there is a question coming. Am I correct?
All right, thank you. But I would like to thank you very much. Well, I would like to use my experience how to raise the awareness of the community about chronic health problem, because we have done that in the field of dementia over the last 20 years, and how we have changed the stigma toward dementia based on giving a public presentation on it. Perhaps I can ask our Chief Executive Officer if we are going to drive this forward to promote healthy, happy, and active community. Will it be possible to organize like workshops where we can discuss how to promote activities and develop framework to roll out and implement pathways for people to make it healthier choices in order to achieve better health outcomes?
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Raze. Further CO to our response in today's meeting papers, is there opportunity to further unpack that at a subsequent workshop?
Of course.
Great. Councillor Raze, that will be noted and included in a subsequent workshop. Question, Councillor Pentridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 4 points I'd like to bring up. And I'll try and relate them to the questions. Has Mr. Bain mentioned the concern of the people in this community about the Birchells development? And I've been approached on numerous times. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but on our last meeting last Thursday, I thought we had a pretty good, fantastic day, where I thought all my colleagues agreed that we would stick with our city manager and work on resolving and fixing that project. And if I recall correctly, I thought I said that it was a good piece of property, and that if it didn't go along as all planned, so be it. But let's turn it into a positive for the city. Now, there's a lot of rumours going around. Are we going to get the opportunity as councillors to put some input into what we do with that building? Or is there going to be some other arrangements made behind our backs to where the building will be told that something's happened and the building's moved on? So that's one question.
Sure, so I'll answer that for you, and the CEO can add to it as needed. We have to be careful as well with regard to our language, because the meeting last week, as you say, went very well, a workshop where we all were afforded the opportunity to clarify any points that we were confused or challenged by. And what we determined was that we have a live expression of interest process with regard to the real estate that we own, that is the Birchells building, and that we would bring that process to a conclusion whereby we would assess against the elements that we had determined were necessary for that project against the preferred person or project and would assess it at that time. And so your comment is correct, that we would ensure that it was best return for the city before we determined the steps that we would take subsequent to that. And at all points of time, councillors would be in the driver's seat and made aware of those steps. CEO?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. That would be the point I would make, that it'll come to a council meeting, the council will make the decision, debate it, and then we'll go from there.
And Councillor Pentridge, and of course, at the correct intersections, as I said to Mr Baines, we will also make that clear to our community as well.
Number two, by the previous council, now there's 7 new ones here, we have a gentleman who has constantly used up more paper than he probably deserves to use. And he was banned from speaking or whatever happened. But I would think that Mr Norman should be given another chance, or at least we should look at whether the new councillors, and I think anyone in the community that hasn't got a lot, I mean, Mr Norman's not a physical person. He's probably got a very active mind. And I don't think that some of us new aldermen, at least, who haven't been subjected, councillors, haven't been subjected to his barrage of paperwork. I think he should be given the opportunity once again to be heard. He is a ratepayer, and I'm not actually asking for an answer. I was actually hoping that some of these things could be considered, and maybe we could bring them up at some time, like at the next meeting or something.
Sure. Well, I can give you an answer. So a communication protocol was put in place. That is due for renewal. That will be an opportunity for us to consider it. With regard to the emails, Mr Norman has told me that you and some other councillors are receiving his correspondence to an alternate email address, so such as your prerogative. But we will review the protocol that was put in place with regard to communications, significant volume of communications from a number of email addresses emanating from Mr Norman, and we will review that as per the protocol we put in place, noting that an effective mechanism has always been made available, such as our response to Mr Norman's questions on notice, as included in today's agenda.
Mr Mayor, in all fairness, his emails are blocked to all of us, so we don't get the opportunity to really, I mean, we're all mature adults.
So just to be clear, Councillor Pentridge, there's a communication protocol. That means that the emails are received by the organisation, and as you saw today, action as necessary. What I've said to you is that a communication protocol is in place. It's due to be reviewed. It will be reviewed, and at subsequent opportunity, all councillors will have the opportunity to review it.
All right, now I'd like to read this because it's obviously important that we say things properly. Now, for this item, I ask for the Mayor's attention. Question. I understand that some ratepayers ask questions on notice. They address them to us, the councillors. Can somebody please explain to me and our other councillors why it is that they are not answered by us, the councillors? Also, when might we be offered an opportunity to discuss and answer ratepayers' questions?
So, thank you, Councillor Pentridge, for the question. As was evidenced in the last agenda of this council, there are opportunities where the Mayor will specifically author a response to a question, and councillors will determine, as is their own want, how and when they engage with any member of the community who brings forward a question or communication with them.
So are you suggesting that someone will, that once the question has been asked by who will come back to what you're saying, that if we're asked, then how do... Anyway, we'll leave that alone. Let me give that some more thought.
Now, number 4.
Sorry, and I'll just further add to that. And then councillors will, of course, determine what they've heard from anyone is worthy of putting forward a notice of motion or responding individually, following up individual queries, responding to an email, responding to a letter, not dissimilar to all methods of communication that councillors are contacted via from individual members of our community. We don't workshop when someone rings us individually. We don't workshop when someone CCs us in on an email. We respond accordingly as in line with our own values and decision-making model.
Thank you. All right, now, the last thing here is the letter that we received last night from the Department of Premier and Cabinet. Now, I personally find this offensive, and I will be responding to Mr. Healy. Now, I think I'm surrounded by mature adults, and I'd like to use this opportunity, if my terminology that might need a bit of polishing up, and I'm hoping over the next period of time it will be. If any of my colleagues find something I've said offensive, and that includes the staff, I have my number on everything. I would appreciate if someone were to talk to me directly, and I will refrain from being offensive. It's never been my intention, or ever would it be, to be rude or be misunderstood. But there's obviously, like I said, the written word's not something I excel at, but there's words in here like a significant majority of councillors work within the boundaries of the code, conduct and act in the best interests of the council and the community. Unfortunately, however, there has been several examples since 2002. Now, why doesn't Mr. Healy state them? Who is he directing that to? And then he also finishes here by saying, this has occurred. Now, why should he, right now, if there is an issue, and I've already invited Mr. Healy to give me some sort of reservation on a regular basis, and at our meeting at the tram sheds, which Sue and I attended, I did make it clear to him that I had a funny feeling we'd be meeting on lots of occasions. And so really, rather than send us letters, I don't think we need this. To me, I see this as more like bullying that he's doing, telling us what we can and can't say. And but I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Look, I think your comments will be taken as they are announced. It's important to understand the letter was sent to every councillor in Tasmania with regard to the work that the Department of Premier and Cabinet and local government manager is undertaking. It's to be seen as a reminder to all elected representatives across all 29 councils of the intent of the legislation, the working with the WorkSafe review that's being undertaken, and with regard to our signature when we were elected as representatives. It was not just sent to the City of Launceston reps, it was sent to every single elected representative in the state. Well, that was the intention. It was addressed to each mayor, and as you'll see in the bottom paragraph, mayors were asked to forward it on. So we'll stop there. We're not going to engage further with regard to correspondence that's been issued to us. You'll take from it what you want, and indeed the regulations, the meeting procedures and the Act will continue to be enforced, as is the intent of Mr Healy and others in terms of good governance. Are there any other questions without notice? Councillor Kai.
It was in the paper about the 37% increase in fines for parking infringements. I was just wondering, does councillors have a say or a vote or have an input on any of this?
So thank you, Councillor Kai. We might just clarify with regard to the penalty units specific to parking fines. Thank you. Duncan, Acting Manager of Governance.
Hi, Councillor. Council formed an intention to make that bylaw last year, so we're just in the public consultation process at the moment. the matter will come back after that process for council to make a formal decision whether to make the bylaw. And it's 39%, not 37%.
And sorry, are you just able to, it's not an increase in parking fees,
No,
importantly?
that's right.
Can you
It's-
just
yeah,
clarify
it's
that?
only in respect of parking penalties that are proposed an increase, not the parking fees. That's set by the council through a separate process.
And the intent with regard to the penalty units and the need for alignment as the rationale for doing the project? Could you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So it'll bring our council broadly into line with the other councils in Tasmania that have penalties for on-street parking meter offences.
CO, anything further?
Other than to say that the council has no control over penalty unit. That's a statutory state government controlled process. So it's about having consistency across legislation. That's why the penalty unit sort of concept exists. And again, Duncan probably explain it more eloquently than I can. So.
Thanks, Councillor Kai. Any further questions without notice? Councillor Walker.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Well, just because we are talking parking, and someone did bring up the subject with me that they said it's no sort of easy feat to pay public parking fines online, for example, like by using a BPay code or something like that. They either have to be paid in person, or I think perhaps a cheque can be written or a credit card can be used. I suppose the question in regards to that is just, has any thought been put into, happy for this to be taken on notice, the streamlining or simplifying the ability for people to pay parking fines?
General Manager Dan.
No, not easily.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Walker. You can, in fact, pay online. There is a process in place now for payment of fines online.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. Perhaps that person hasn't paid a fine in a while. My second question relates to the final decision by the state government to cancel the $10 million Building Better Regions Fund Round 4 grant, and that is in regards to the details of the deed of agreement that council had with the proposed developer of that site, what were those details and will they be made public?
So you, of course, are referring to the federal government. You said the state government with regard to the cancelling of that.
My apologies.
No,
I shall ask the question
knew what you
again.
meant.
I'm more than happy
Just to
to
clarify.
that the federal government's grant in regards to the $10 million, now that federal grant, a final decision has been made to cancel that $10 million grant, will the details of the deed of agreement that council had with the proponents of that development be made public? And if so, what are those details?
We'll take that one on notice, Councillor Walker. Thank you so much. Any other questions without notice? There being none, let's move to item 13, committee reports. 13.1, the Transport Committee meetings held on the 29th of September and the 15th of December. Someone to move. Councillor Harris, thank you. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Harris, do you wish to speak to the item?
I will briefly. This is two reports. One, the one prior to the latest council election, of which Councillor Mackenzie was a member of the committee. The items that we discussed, including two new community members, Adam Sutton and Dale Goldsworthy, which is a change to what has been happening in the past with community members. They had, I guess, a different slant on it and have brought a different view to the committee, so it is a welcome change. And you can see what we've been talking about. And similarly, at our meeting on the 15th of December, when there was a great update for us on the capital and operational works program over the next 3 years, but also there was an update provided on the successful Ride to Work breakfast that was held during October, as well as the traffic signals presentation on Lindsay Street and Invermay, which I'm sure there are many users would be pleased to know that that is still on our agenda to be perhaps resolved. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Mackenzie is the seconder. Any further contributions to 13.1, Transport Committee? Councillor Harris, is there anything you forgot to say? Let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 12-0. 13.2, Access Advisory Committee, meeting held on the 7th of December. Moved, Councillor Dawkins. A seconder, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Dawkins, do you wish to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking the former manager of Liverpool Communities, Tracy Mallett, for the incredible amount of work she did in this area. Having personal and also professional experience in this field really gave us a fantastic start in the last term, but we weren't able to continue it through the full 4 years because of budgetary constraints, unfortunately. So we're starting a new term, we're starting afresh. We're hopeful that then the new replacement manager will have the same level of interest in the area of access and that we'll be able to start to implement some of our strategies. We've spoken about the inclusion officer. I'm sure we're not far away from having a new team member who will be instrumental in this department, which will be very welcomed. We spoke about the Disabilities Discrimination Act review. Looking at the bus stops, we've got 4 years to look at 483 bus stops in this area to ensure that they are compliant. And as usual in this committee, we spoke about the micro mobility scooter trial. I think it was 1 or 2 days before one of the providers actually pulled out. There was a lengthy discussion about, well, you know, if we give feedback from this committee or from individuals in the disability community, are we being listened to? But then I guess it was never really considered that one of the providers would pull out, which has actually solved half the problems that people facing accessibility issues were considering. So I'm looking forward to the next meeting. I'm looking forward to the new officer, and I hope that next time we discuss this, we'll be discussing implementation of our strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins, and you'll be pleased to know I think the new officer started late last week. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. I just stand to endorse the work done by that committee, having sort of been on it for several years myself earlier. I think just really wanting to address back to one of Mr Bain's comments in regards to parking spaces for disabled people. It's something that's come up regularly in conversation at the Access Committee, and I think an appropriate place for that to be discussed. So the number and the location of disability parking is something that's been spoken about regularly and as part of our disability action plan anyway, our access action plan, sorry, not disability, our access action plan. So I think in referring that, I would refer that matter back into the committee for further conversation if that's an issue that's been raised.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Sensible. Any further contributions with regard to Access Advisory Committee? Councillor Dawkins, anything further? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is carried by all councillors present, 12-0. 13.3 is the Cataract Gorge Reserve Advisory Committee, specifically meeting held on the 13th of December. It's moved. Councillor Walker, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Britton. For anyone confused, I'm on page 41. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, it was the final committee meeting mid-December last year for the Cataract Gorge Reserve Advisory Committee. We do welcome, and I do thank councillors for endorsing me as the chair of that committee going forward, and do welcome also Councillor McMahon to that committee. And also to acknowledge that we are in the process of recruiting new community members, and to certainly acknowledge the work of Don Deffendorfer. I'll get it right. It was one of those two. And Don has been a stalwart of that committee. He's been on there previously, taken some time away, been on it again. He has indicated that he won't put his name forward to go there again. But, you know, just typical of the type of person that you want on a committee like that, someone who's passionate about the gorge, who's knowledgeable, who's, you know, sort of interested in all the many and varied things that are associated with that area for Launceston Council, and in saying that, the Cataract Gorge Committee did go through a 2023 work plan to look at some of the bigger issues in conjunction with council staff, because when you think about a reserve that important and that large in Launceston, it touches on many and varied issues to do with water quality and weed management, but also to do with the public's sort of interaction with it, whether it's for recreation, for tourism, and various other things. So of course there's a lot of things that you have to plan forward in order to discuss in regards to it. They're not such specific things, they are slightly bigger ticket items. So that's where we are with the Cataract Gorge Committee. Certainly looking forward to finding out who those new community representatives are, and I shall no doubt at our next meeting be able to inform the council on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Britton? No. Does any councillor wish to speak to Cataract Gorge Reserve Advisory Committee? Deputy Mayor?
Only to say briefly that there are peacock and peahen chicks up there at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Walker, anything else you'd like to add? That being the case, let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 12-0. Tender Review Committee at 13.4, the meeting held on the 15th of December pertaining to Crossroads Civil with regard to Tamer Street to George, and Contact Electrical with regard to the Birch Ave and Churchill Park lighting upgrades. Someone to move? Councillor Harris, thank you. Seconder, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Harris, do you wish to speak to the item?
I will briefly. The amounts are there for us. Interesting to be a part of this new Tender Review Committee following the change of the committees we all sit on, and interesting to see that the Crossroads work will commence, in fact, shortly in, I think, February or March, for the work being done between Tamer Street and George Street, pavement rehabilitation. The lighting was also of interest, the $1.3 million for the upgrade of lighting, despite the fact that we were unsuccessful in being a Women's World Cup soccer base. The lighting will nevertheless provide great lighting for our local players for the next decade or more. So it is a very worthwhile thing that we have approved here, and it will certainly improve the facilities for those who do take part in soccer at both Birch Avenue and Churchill Park.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just, I guess all I really wanted to note is that we still have some significant issues in attracting tenders at the moment with the tight market that's out there, and I think that's something that is always challenging to make sure you're getting value for money. I'd like to sort of acknowledge the officers and the work they go to actually, get tenderers to put forward, and I know that we're reviewing our processes to try and make it more attractive to tender to Launceston, which may be that we take some more of the risk associated with the planning that sort of stuff. So I think it's really useful, but we always go back where we only have single tenderers and things like that, and double check against our sort of quantity surveyors and things like that to ensure we're getting value for money. And in this particular instance, one of them was only one, I think, but that was, they've done work in the past before, and looking at rates on past activities, I think, is showing that they're still providing a value proposition in their tenders, but something that we've still got to continue to work on, not that we're alone in that area.
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Any other contributions to 13.4 Tender Review Committee? Councillor Harris, anything further? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is carried 12-0. Item 13.5, the Sister City Committee meeting held on the 15th of December 2022. Someone to move the item? Councillor Britton. A seconder? Councillor Palmer. Councillor Britton, do you wish to speak to the item?
Only very briefly as well. I think the committee's had a little bit of a hard time over the last couple of years with COVID, so just looking forward to working with Councillor Pentridge, yourself and Councillor Palmer, and hopefully we'll have something to bring you all soon. Done. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Councillor Palmer. Nothing further. Any other contributions with regard to Sister City Committee meeting, noting the points are listed there? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. We now move to item 14, Community and Place Network. 14.1, Terms of Reference, the Homelessness Advisory Committee. The Council amends the existing Homelessness Advisory Committee's terms of reference by broadening references to our city to clarify that the City of Launceston is seeking a regional approach with regard to homelessness. It's moved, Councillor Walker. It's seconded by Councillor Dr. Raze. Councillor Walker, do you wish to speak to the item?
Thank you, I do, Mayor, and excuse me, bumping the microphone there. Of course, Launceston Council has, for a long time liaised with service providers, governments on different levels, and government agencies in regards to homelessness, but more recently have formed this committee to bring our expertise and the knowledge together in our community, both by the service providers and potentially other groups too, whether they be businesses or community groups or individuals, to address this issue in a forthright manner. And part of that is realising that, of course, not only is this an issue that is in Launceston, but in our broader northern Tasmanian region, and therefore it is appropriate that we expand the committee in regards to that. We are working with other councils in the region, and I suppose I would just encourage anyone who's listening to have a look at the list of organisations that are part of the membership of the committee, and to look at the objectives of the committee, and to also look further afield at other councils who have already taken steps in this direction, because of course we have specialists that work in the area, not on council but in our community, but it is the council's facilities that is quite often accessed and needs to be accessed and maintained for people who find themselves homeless. It's council land that people quite often choose to inhabit as a result of them finding themselves homeless. And it is the council that the community turn to when they're seeking answers and solutions to challenges that they might be facing, whether it is, problems that they can see in the community or indeed problems that they're dealing with themselves. So the council has recognised that central role, has recognised that it's a broader problem than our city alone, and is making those steps to address that. And I'm really heartened and excited by the collaboration that is going on, and what will come of that, you can be assured, will be a positive and lasting response, because, and I don't like to use the word problem in regards to homelessness, it's an issue, because the issue will be with us continuously. It may get worse, it may get a little better. Hopefully through our efforts it does, but regardless, it will be a continuing issue for most modern societies. And that is entirely appropriate that this is our response. So yeah, I do commend people look at the terms of reference in general, and as I say, look at what other solutions are around, because there will be many, many things that will come out of this that the council will be able to provide as a result of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Question, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to it, probably just apply to this committee. This is how the committee will operate, and it says as an advisory body that provides non-binding strategic guidance to the council. The committee does not have delegated authority from council, so it doesn't make any decisions. I guess what my concern has been with a number of committees I've been involved with over the years is we bring in people, particularly from the public, who come in and give up their time freely to discuss things with us. But there's never anything that actually feeds back specifically to the council. We get a nice report which says we discussed this, we discussed that. And I just wonder whether there's a format there that we should consider about where they can't make any resolutions. That has to be councillors, and I accept that and understand the reasons behind that. That's our job. But where they can make recommendations back to the council at a workshop, for us to consider from the body of work that they've done, which is a sense that may give them a bit more feeling of value, particularly in areas like this particular one. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and they might say, we think council should think about doing this. How does that come back to us other than going via an officer and coming back via a regurgitation through that process? I just wonder if that's something that can be considered. I'll just wonder the CEO's question on that one.
CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Maybe I've been around too long.
Yeah.
But I mean, the way these committees have generally worked, that if there's a recommendation they wish to make to council, then it does come to council formally through a council meeting for you to be able to debate and make a decision. So, but perhaps it hasn't happened for a little while. But that's certainly been my practice with these committees. So there is an ability for they're there to advise the council. So if that warrants a workshop prior to that happening, then so be it. But certainly the mechanism exists for them to not only report to council, but to make a recommendation for the council to consider a decision. So we perhaps just need to put a bit more focus around that in terms of their ability to be able to do that. They're not making the decision, but they are able to advise and give recommendations. So.
I think all committee chairs have heard that and appreciated it. Thank you. Great. Councillor Raze.
Yeah, just rather than a member of this committee, I feel it's so important to help the most needy in our society. I feel heartened by so many passionate people as member of the community. I'm looking forward that we work together and achieve some positive things for the homeless people.
Thanks, Councillor Raze. Deputy Mayor.
Only quickly to say how impressed I am at the previous council's initiative to have moved forward with the recognising of this being an issue that is very well publicised and actually physically seen out there. So it's great to see and to hear that we have people in place that are under the right mindset, that they understand that there are people that work in this space every single day, that are professionals, that are educated in this department, and we are just one of a facilitator as to one that can listen and help where that is required, and to move with what Councillor Walker was saying as well, that homelessness, whilst we don't want to view it as a problem, that homelessness is an issue that is stemmed from various issues, and that is how we as a council are approaching that. That we're not trying to fix homelessness, but we understand that there are many factors, and homelessness is a result of those, not necessarily the problem, the issue. And I think we're all on the same page.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other contributions? Councillor Walker, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. I will close, and I'm sure if you asked General Manager Dan Ryan, he would probably be able to help fill in some of those blanks as well, but I will do my best to do that. If you look at the objectives, and this is just in reference to some of the comments around the table of the committee, certainly to develop a homelessness action plan is central to the council's efforts in this regard, and that's probably sets it slightly aside from some of the other committees insofar as there is a specific plan that is being developed. And this plan is being developed in conjunction with the experience of other councils and other organisations who look towards identifying as much as possible who and why people are finding themselves homeless, but also has an objective of aiming towards a functional 0 point. That the ultimate goal would be that nobody, and of course everyone would agree with this, that nobody needs to be homeless. Now, of course, there always will be, as we've talked about. But, in that regard, it does mean that as chair, I will be coming to this committee for endorsement of that action plan at some point when that's developed. It's no mean feat to develop it, of course, because you're working with a wide range of stakeholders to begin with, and then, of course, you're dealing with a wide range of people who find themselves homeless. And so that data needs to be collected before we can be definitive in which way we're acting. But I'm certainly keen to progress it as soon as possible, as soon as humanly possible. In regards to that, of course, our mayor, when he was deputy, was certainly an advocate for homelessness lockers, for example, and pursuing community concerns and efforts to provide those, for example. Now, this is now an opportunity that a committee can take that and pursue it further. I would love to see Launceston, I'd like to identify that Launceston Council can provide further services. It might be 24-hour showers. It might be lockers. It might be street furniture that is amenable for people who need to use it for whatever reason. And we've all seen these ideas in different parts of the world, so there's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel. It's something that will develop out of this homelessness action plan, but necessarily that will take a little time to identify and what those things are, and to not try to replicate what services are already providing. We know that there is a wide range of services that do an immense amount of work in this town, but we also know that, rightly so, and I'll finish on this point, thank you, Mayor, that people would expect that the council not just contribute but help coordinate a citywide response on behalf of the citizens of this town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker, and we also recognise those people who bravely are the community reps on that committee. Let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 14.2, signature event sponsorship program invitation list. So importantly, this is not the funding. This is simply providing an invitation to organisations to have the opportunity to apply, to have their applications assessed by the rigours of a panel comprising internal and external members. We note that Councillor Palmer, with his connection, paid connection to Dance Sport Tasmania, Councillor Dawkins, similarly with RSPCA, and Councillor Harris have departed the meeting. Someone please to move 14.2. Councillor Walker, thank you. A seconder? Councillor McMahon, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And in your description of the motion, I think it becomes fairly self-explanatory, and a quick look at the list, provides a little bit of a who's who of Launceston event organisers, and perhaps the councillors that have left the room show, how cool they are in being involved in those, whereas the councillors still in the room, might choose to make themselves available for one of these events in the near future, because it is certainly a great list of events, and we look forward to getting applications from those various organisations.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Question, Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, it's just in relation to the Tennis Tasmania one, which I appreciate it's not on the list because they're not doing anything at this point in time. Sorry, they're not actually in the current signature event because they cancelled the event for this year. But I just know it's got the asterisk beside it. If I recall, in the previous iteration, we got locked into a deal where we were paying a commission to an agent who was actually fundraising. I'd just like to make sure that into the future, if we have any things, given there's been this break in transmission, that we certainly make certain that we try to avoid having to pay any commission to any fundraising consultant, which I think was a previous situation.
Not for a long time. I think that's noted. The CEO and other managers have heard that, and I think the members of the event committee have heard that as well. Good point. Councillor McMahon, anything you'd like to add?
Mayor, I'd just like to say that we're extremely lucky here in Launceston to continually have individuals and organisations bringing events to our city, and I look forward to receiving their applications once again this year.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Walker, anything further? So we note that this in no way locks them in to the particular level that has been provided as an invitation for them to apply, should they wish to not apply for 3-year funding and apply on a year-on-year basis for a larger amount, that is certainly an opportunity available to them. For some event organisers, this just provides some surety should they be scored at the level that they desire. So we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 9-0. Thank you. And we welcome councillors Palmer, Dawkins and Harris back to the meeting. Let's move to 15, Organisational Services Network. You heard some reference to it in a previous question. 15.1, Code of Conduct for Councillors. Someone to move the item, noting a question. Councillor Mackenzie is moving the councillors. Thank you. Councillor Harris is seconding the model code of conduct. Councillor Walker has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. And I note in the previous council consideration that it's mentioned that it was considered that workshop on the 19th of this month. But I do believe that that was changed so that the councillors present have not had a chance to discuss this prior to it being brought to council. And I have certainly mentioned that to yourself and to the CEO already, but I suppose my concern is, and I know it is a model code of conduct, and it is quite straightforward, and it's what other councils are adopting. My only concern is that that discussion hasn't taken place, and there may or may not be issues or concerns that could be raised before we vote on this. So I'm happy to take advice on that from the CEO or yourself, Mayor. Personally, I do struggle with the idea that someone's raised tone could be construed as being inappropriate or could be conceived as being disrespectful, when it is necessary sometimes, and not very often, in a chamber such as this, for points to be made with some vigour. And I feel as though sometimes, and I may have no one else who agrees with me, I'm not sure, because I can be a little bit forceful at times, but so can other people. And I feel that that is a part of our job, whether we like it or not. When you're defending the status quo, it's easy to remain calm. When you're asking for progress or for change or for something to be reviewed, sometimes you have to iterate that point in ways that may be construed as being too forceful. And I'm certainly conscious of that. And I do believe that at all times I'm respectful of my fellow councillors and council officers. But nonetheless, that would be my concern. It would be something that I would otherwise discuss prior to voting on this. So my question is, can the CEO or the Mayor address those concerns? Not so much of my personal queries about the Code of Conduct, because by and large I do support it, but the appropriateness of new councillors especially not having that opportunity.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. I draw your attention to the purpose set out on page 61, and I know that you and other councillors understand that, but I also draw councillors to the advice that we received from the Local Government Association with regard to all councillors being provided the same information. CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, obviously I won't comment on the specifics that you raised in respect of your own concerns with it, but from a procedural point of view, the council has to, under the Local Government Act, review the Code of Conduct within 3 months of each ordinary election. But this year's slightly different, and I'll just read. We've had a correspondence from LGAT CEO this morning, just to probably reinforce what we're doing here, though, that as part of the government's current Code of Conduct review and the subsequent bill currently before Parliament, the government has committed to review of its model code and then the development of a standard Code of Conduct. Whilst 27T7 of the legislative instrument of the Act does not specify how this should be done. Given that work will occur on the code by the government throughout 2023, the Minister is extremely unlikely to entertain any substantive change to the model code engaging or emerging from a council review rather. So it's probably best not to put significant effort into this task, given that we're going to be part of that review over the course of the next few months. So that's the reason it's sort of been brought forward with no change as a requirement of the Local Government Act that we just needed to do it.
Any further questions, Councillor Walker?
Is that advice able to be circulated, CEO? Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie, as the mover.
Just a question first. I'm just querying about the things that have got ... dots beside them as to what those ... dots might represent.
Acting Manager Duncan.
Thank you.
Team Leader.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mackenzie. There are previous clauses that were in there that have been removed by the amendment order.
Oh, okay, so they're not there any longer. They're not, just not hidden from us. Okay, thank you. No, that's okay. Look, I've read the Code of Conduct, and I guess because that's how I operate, I have no problem with it. I think it's a reasonable thing. I don't think it does make any comment about you raising your voice or doing something like that. It's doing it in a way which doesn't impact on other people, I think, is the key, and it's not taking offence. Now, I appreciate people can take offence to all sorts of different things. Me looking at you like this might do that. But the reality of it is I think the Code of Conduct is something which is reasonable and sensible, and I think, apropos to further conversations on a previous question that was raised earlier, I think that was really largely designed because there are activities that have gone in other councils which have been well publicised about people leaving council because of some of the ways they've been treated. Now, again, some of us come from different schools of the way we do things, and I come from a school where I had been berated by my father and things like that in the past, and are used to people actually confronting me in various things. But this is a code of conduct which is, I guess, meant to encompass everybody, and therefore having something which is actually standard and that we can all act to is fine, and I think that it's an appropriate code of conduct until the review is done.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Mover. Seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins.
I wasn't going to speak to this, but because there's been commentary around individuals' presentations on council today, and I just wanted to draw attention to a point that Councillor Mackenzie made. This is a broad policy. This is not about any individuals, and I guess it's up to every individual to look to themselves and their sense of morality and ethics and how they want to be perceived. But I just want to say that I don't think a contemporary leader, if you think about someone like Jacinda Ardern, who leaves the global stage as somebody with incredible esteem. I mean, she led with compassion and strength. She didn't need to raise her voice or offend people to be a progressive leader. She showed that there's a way that you can do that without having to be that typical masculine, raise your voice, confront people and move through. That there are better ways, and I really hope on this council we can show that.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Are there any other contributions with regard to the model code of conduct? Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you for indulging me in those questions earlier on. Look, I will vote to support it. I understand that we are, on a bit of a timeline in regards to the state government's review of local government. We know that local government is, a level of government that is very passionate and heartfelt, and that people will be passionate about the things that they believe in, and they wish to convey that passion. We've been fortunate in Launceston. We haven't had a plethora of complaints under Code of Conduct. So it's obvious that we have, contained ourselves but and behaved in appropriate ways by and large in Launceston. And that's a great thing. So I'd be disappointed if, that we end up because of this in a situation where, someone does take offence or embarrassment at something that someone says, and therefore see that as an appropriate course of action to make a code of conduct complaint. And look, understandably, all I'm doing is tilting at windmills perhaps, because it hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened so much in the past. I suppose my concern is not to inhibit the liveliness and the passion of debate in this chamber. So that was my only concern, but with some sort of trepidation, I will be supporting this today.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to close?
Yeah, I do, and thanks for that, Councillor Walker, because I think over the journey that I've been here, there have been issues where there's been some issues with it. But I think what we've dealt with in this council is we've actually talked to people. jump to code of conduct as the first way of dealing with something. So our resolution process is actually about dealing with the issue first, and it only becomes where it becomes more of a major issue that this might be contemplated. The trouble you have is you have a public out there who will look at us in a different lens, through different eyes, and we've mentioned a couple of people who look at us in completely different ways today, and therefore we have to be mindful that round this table we might be able to sort an issue out, but out there, coming in here, they don't know us and they might have a view in relation to it. So we do need to be mindful of having some code that we operate under so that we're consistent in the way that we deal with the community.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, for closing, and I draw your attention that Section 28T of the Local Government Act requires Council to review its Code of Conduct within 3 months after an ordinary election. This is nothing new. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those councillors in favour? That is all councillors present. It is carried 12-0. 15.2, Code of Conduct for Members of Special Committees. That Council approves the following Code of Conduct for members of special committees. Someone to move the item? Councillor Mackenzie, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just again, I think it's important that what we have to stand by, we need to make sure that our committees run in a similar manner, and therefore having a code of conduct for everybody to operate under is important.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Seconder, Councillor Harris. Does anyone wish to speak to this item update? No one? So we note that the last... Councillor Walker.
We have a question. Well, first of all, this refers to all our committees, I'm imagining. So, standard working group committee type.
General Manager Nathan.
Yes, that's certainly my understanding, that any subcommittee that councillors sit on, this is relevant to those.
And secondly, my question, and it just only, not that an incident occurred, but it was brought to my attention, if there was someone who, for whatever reason, a community member or a councillor who didn't attend a certain amount of committee meetings, is that covered under the Code of Conduct? Because there seems to be no way of addressing, I mean, that's the sort of absence of, someone rather than the presence and bad behaviour of someone.
Yeah, look, I'll have to take that one on notice, councillor, and get back to you.
Are there any additional comments with regard to the Code of Conduct for special committees of council? Deputy Mayor.
Can I just make just a quick comment? Being so newly elected into this, we can see that from my experience on the outside, seeing that we have an incredibly eclectic mix and an incredible representation from all sorts of different sides of our community. And whilst we are looked upon, we are the representatives who elect to come here today to act in a certain way, I do personally believe that there are some representations in the community that do expect certain elects here to act in a certain way, and whether that is professionally in their own experiences with us as councillors or whether that is with us personally, that we've been elected. We all have different elements and different veins into the community, and whilst we have a code of conduct that we act that way when we are representing the council, representing the people, we also do represent the people who have elected us and put their trust in us, and that there are going to be voices that will be heard in this group of councillors that may very well be different to the actions of previous councils, and I think that that's what people in our community will also expect some of. Whilst we expect us to be professional, we expect us to act in a certain way, we have been elected and we will be representing the people who have elected us, some of us with more vigour and more passion, some of us with more heightened vocabulary than some others as well. So I enjoy being a part of that, but I do also understand that there will be a perception from the community, but I respect myself personally that someone can feel free to talk to me how they please, and I try to use my vocabulary here, which I sometimes struggle to try and sound smart and talk correctly, which I think this can also be moved forward with a lot of gobbledygook that does come through speaking. But if we can be frank at times with those who we know we can, but we also do work with vigour to understand that there is appropriate means to do that. But me personally, talk to me how you please, call me whenever, speak to me in a manner that you feel comfortable with, because I will do the same with you. And if you want an answer, I will give you an answer also. So that's just my little comment.
Thank you, and we certainly appreciate that for item 15.1, and the same principles I'm sure apply to 15.2, where particularly for external members who are not officers or who are not elected members but are members of our special committees, expect there to be vigour and passion, but respect and rules. And so 15.2, brought in after the last election in 2018, afforded us with that mechanism at those special committee meetings. Are there any other contributions to 15.2? Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to close?
Just to note that in the Homeless Advisory Committee terms of reference, it does talk about members absent without notification of 2 consecutive members. So I assume that's probably common in all the other ones as well. Can be removed by going to the CEO, I think. So that does happen. But no, otherwise no.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Thank you. 15.3, budget amendments. The recommendation is listed there and clearly spelt out. Someone to move 15.3, moved Councillor Mackenzie. Seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, look, these documents come from time to time where there are changes in budgets, and under the town council rules, we have to be presented to a council meeting, which I think is open and transparent, so that people can see where budgets have been changed for whatever reason. And I think each of the items that are in relation to that are actually explained in the narrative underneath each of the items that have been changed. So I'd really just hope that the members of the council understand that. If they don't, then Nathan's there to ask the questions.
That is right. Councillor Mackenzie. Seconder, Councillor Harris.
Just briefly to say that one of the items on there that caught my attention was the unauthorised access to the Russell Plains farm, and the fact that we have to now spend $60,000 to install a vandal-proof gate and deterrence along the fence line of our property to stop others going into party in a burnt-out house and now abandoned shed, which is to be removed. So it is an unfortunate indictment of our society that that's what we've got to do, because that does mean we are taking money away from other projects, and I'm sure $60,000 could have been used much better, but this is necessary to secure our property. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other contributions? 15.3, budget amendments. Councillor Mackenzie, anything further? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is carried 12-0. Item 15.4, amendment to fees, particularly with signature events, that Council approves an amendment to the adopted fees and charges for 2022-2023. Someone to move, Councillor Mackenzie, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to speak to the item?
Community's got to be happy when it's 0.00 the fees being changed to, which I think is probably on the basis that where we have events associated with when we charge them, we take most of the grant that we give them back again. So this is an opportunity to ensure that they can make the grant funds go further and actually put them to the event rather than having to pay it back to council.
Councillor Harris.
Yes, very much so. As an event organiser, to have such a thing makes it quite an attractive feature to become an approved signature event, so that you don't have to pay the council fees for the hiring of the buildings, facilities and spaces. I'm not sure if this applies to road closures as such. I assume it does. Is that a question perhaps I might throw at the end?
We can answer the question. General Manager Dan.
Just to clarify, Councillor Harris, it does only apply to the fees associated with the hiring of halls and venues, so it is expected that signature events, just like all the other event categories, will continue to pay the fees associated with them, etc.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any further contributions? 15.4. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 12-0. We now move to item 16, the CEO network. 16.1, 47 to 67 Lawrencevale Road, South Launceston. I'd welcome the first speaker, Teresa Hatton.
Mayor and councillors, Teresa Hatton. I'm the building designer here with my clients who own 43 Lawrencevale Road. I'm not sure if you're aware, I sent out earlier an application for an easement at the rear of the property, which is Effingham Street, trying to allow my client to come onto the road. So thankfully, common sense has prevailed and we've had negotiations with council, and now in front of you, you have application to buy a piece of land, which would then allow my client to access the back of his property. I look forward to the result. Thank you.
Paul Robin.
Thank you, Mayor and CEO and councillors. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for using the land illegally, and I'd like to get it fixed up as soon as I can, but I run a roof plumbing business and I have a large trailer and a lot of scaffolding equipment out the back of the property. There's nowhere to park down the front. There is some parking area, but there's a couple of cars using that already. The situation with the carport that we'd like to build at the back is that it does need to go along the back of the property so as not to access the, to affect the landslip too much. And so what I'm seeking is that we have been given some options of buying some land, and we thought that would be a good way so that we can access that bit of property on the side at the back of our house. And apart from that, I did have some other things written down. I basically said everything, but thank you. I now hope you see how to approve our purchase.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Someone to move? Councillor McKenzie, as recommended. Seconder, Councillor Walker. Councillor McKenzie, do you wish to speak to the item?
Look, just briefly, I think it's a great outcome. I think we've worked it through, got a really good outcome for the community. I think taking away from an easement, which I didn't have, I wasn't happy with. I think the ownership of it and putting that in the title of the property, which makes really minimal issues in relation to the other land that we own or could use into the future. So I think it's a really good practical outcome.
Thanks, Councillor McKenzie. Seconder, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, a eminently sensible solution to a problem that the land, our neighbour, did have with their access, ingress to their property. And, you know, certainly, Paul, you wouldn't be the first to be using council land for access to your property, but you've done the right thing and come and you've found a solution. And this solution, just I suppose, is a word of caution for other people who might look at council land and think, well, we might have a go too. This land is, you know, not to be built upon. It is public open space, but it's certainly not an area, you know, further up the hill. It is utilised by the traffic playground that's been redeveloped. The Road Safety Centre, thank you very much for the correct terminology, Councillor Harris, but it does provide a solution for the landowner, and certainly it's something that was quite unique in that respect. It's not often that we have land that doesn't really have that value for building upon or for future development and things like that. So, yeah, good job all round. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Pentridge.
Yeah, I think that being very aware of the situation, but I think all the councillors need to be congratulated. I mean, there was a reasonably negative beginning to that story, and it's nice to see that not only did a positive outcome occur, but the people we did it for appreciated it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Any other contributions? Councillor McKenzie, just to close.
Again, yes, I think importantly, which is what Councillor Walker said, this will not set a precedent for future land grabs that people might have in relation to it because of its unique situation. And I think we need to deal with these on a case-by-case basis. And I think in this particular case, I can separate it from other issues that we may deal with into the future, which we may not support.
Indeed. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 12-0. Item 17, closed council. That council moves into closed session to consider 17.1, the minutes, 17.2, 11 Centreway, Launceston, and 17.3. It is moved. Councillor Walker, seconder, Councillor Harris. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. We will now move into closed session. open council. Someone to move? Councillor Harris, thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Britton. Confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of December and the endorsement of recommendation to amend lease details for 11 Centreway, Launceston. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. The meeting is closed at 3:29. Thank you so much.